Hello everyone, it's Deborah Morgan with Kids Health Revolution, and I'm bringing you another Kids Health Revolution holiday tip. And this is a recipe for a nice shaped cookie, you know, like the star cookies and the Christmas tree cookies we see all over the place, that is gut friendly and full of good nutrients this time. So this one is actually GAPS compliant as well as paleo compliant. It is nut free because it is a recipe that I'm making for my son to take to his Christmas party at school. It also happens to be egg free, as well as the usual gluten and dairy and all of those processed foods, and processed sugars free. So I think that you'll quite like it. It's got some of the yummy Christmas flavors in it, and it's super simple to make. The recipe is posted above this video, so you can get it there. You can also get it from my blog at kidshealthrevolution.com. I've posted the recipe there as well with some photos. So all you're going to need is some seeds. So this one is done with pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and chia seed, or ground chia seed in this case. So I have a cup of sunflower seeds in here, half a cup of pumpkin seeds, and a quarter cup of ground white chia. So that is just going to go into our food processor. And we're going to ground that up into a flour. Okay, so we have a fairly fine flour there. It's not going to be obviously as fine as a gluten type flour, or even as an almond flour, but because we need to make this nut free for school, seeds are our best choice here. So it's a little thicker, but it's still really fine. It works great for making these types of cookies. Okay, so that goes back in, and then we're going to work on our wet ingredients. So here I have a really good sized chunk of ginger, because ginger has all those yummy flavors of the season. So in that goes into the food processor. And then I like to use dates as my sweetener because they're a whole food and they're very nutrient dense. And they give this a nice deep flavor to this cookie. And they also help to hold it together. So depending on how sweet you want it, I usually put in about 5 dates. You might want more if you're just transitioning into a gut healthy diet and you want to make it a little bit sweeter, or maybe you're giving these kids, he's sharing them in the class, and you want something that's a little bit sweeter that the regular palates will enjoy as well. What have I got in there? 5. I'm going to put 1 more in. Okay, so there is 6. Okay, so we're going to give that a little blend, chop up those dates and chop up the ginger chunk. Okay, and it's starting to come together. We've still got a few big chunks in there, so I'm going to let it ride for a minute. Better. Now we're going to add in our butter, and I just have, I'm sorry, it's not butter. I call it butter. It's ghee. So if you're on a GAPS diet and you're able to use dairy, then butter would certainly work. We use ghee because we have issues with the dairy proteins. If you're on a paleo diet, ghee would work. If you can't tolerate ghee, then certainly by all means use a coconut oil. That would work just as well. So I have 3 tablespoons here, and we're just going to add that into the mix of dates and ginger. And just pulse to get it all nice and mixed together. We're going to scrape down the sides here. Okay, and I can see by the amount that I have in my bowl here that it's not going to be quite enough moisture for the amount of dry ingredients that I have. So all that I'm going to do in this case, because I don't want to measure out extra butter and things, is just measure out less of my dry ingredient into this bowl. And this kind of baking is a lot less like the baking, the traditional baking, where it's very precise and almost scientific in the amounts that you need to use. This is really, you play with it until you get to the consistency that you want. And so we're going to walk through that. So this is some really nice spices, some Christmas spices. We have, let me just double check what we have here. We have a whole teaspoon of cinnamon in here. There's a half a teaspoon of nutmeg, an eighth of a teaspoon of clove, and then a pinch of sea salt in this. And I'm just going to add it into the date mixture and get it all nice and mixed around. You notice I'm pulsing that. I found that I like to pulse it just because it, I find that it mixes things in a little bit more evenly when you're pulsing the speed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add in a bit of my dry ingredients, and just to give you guys a little bit of a guideline, I'm going to put in about half of my bowl here. So that works out to be a little bit more than half. And let's see how it comes out. Okay. So it's actually still a little bit wet. So we're okay to go ahead and add the rest of it. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Now, I'm just going to try and shape that with my hand, which I can do quite easily. It does form into a nice dough ball. And this is what we're going to use to make our cookies, our shapes. So pretty simple so far. I'm just going to move these things out of the way. Get rid of my date pits there. So here I have a couple of sheets of parchment paper, and this is really important when you are rolling out cookies of this nature. Helps so that they aren't sticking all over the place. So get a good size dough ball going there, and it's quite pliable. And you can just press it out with your hand, and it's going to crack on the edges, and that's okay. We're not making tons of cookies with these. Just making a few treats. Now, if you were to make these with coconut oil rather than the ghee, these would also be a vegan cookie. So you can roll it out, and if you do that, you want to make sure that you put your other piece of parchment over top. Let's see if I can find my rolling. Okay, I just flatten it out with my hand. I like a bit of a thicker cookie, but you can also make them thin and just roll them nice and evenly, like so. Okay. Peel your other parchment off, and then you can go ahead and cut out your cookies. So we'll do a star. And we can probably get a couple of trees out of this one. So I used the wrong end of that one. My fingers can always tell the difference. Okay, and then what I do is I just peel the edges away here. And because this dough is a little stickier, well, come on, work with me here. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to get them off, but You can also, if you're not too worried about the nut thing, you can add a little bit of almond flour to your parchment paper. The other thing that would work is if you used arrowroot powder, or you could also use a tapioca starch and just add it to the bottom of your parchment, and you know that that way you're not going to get sticking to the parchment. And a spatula also works nicely. So we just transfer them over onto our baking sheet, like so. So there's what they look like. Okay, so these are ready then to go into the oven. Obviously, you're going to finish your whole big ball of dough, cut out all the different cookies in the little shapes that you want, put them on your cookie sheet, nice and spread out, and then they will go into the oven, 200 degrees, about 40 minutes. And you'll want to check on them a couple of times during that 40 minutes, because we want these to get a little bit browned and to form a bit of a crust on the bottom and the top, so they're a firm, sort of crunchy cookie. But we don't want them to cook too fast. So that's why we cook them so low, because when they cook at a higher temperature and more quickly, they kind of develop a bit too dark and burnt of a taste. So it's good just to go low and slow with these ones. If you have a dehydrator, you could put these in your dehydrator and leave them overnight. Or if your oven goes down to a really low temperature, around 100, you could also just pop them in and forget about them overnight. And that's a great way to do it as well. So when they are finished, they come out of the oven and look like these little guys. So they're a nice little crisp on the outside, a little bit soft on the inside as well. The recipe I've given you will make about 24 of these thin cookies. If you make them a bit thicker, you might get 18 out of them. Okay, if they're a little bit thicker, they need to cook for a little bit longer. So now, one word of caution with these cookies. You'll notice with the recipe I put in 6 dates. So 6 dates made 24 cookies. So if you do the math on that, you realize that they're not going to be a super sweet cookie, which is one of the things I love about them, because I can feel okay giving my child 3 or 4 of them and knowing he's not getting this crazy sugar overload, and in fact is getting some pretty good nutrition with them. But if your child is just transitioning into a gut healthy protocol or just coming off gluten and processed foods, this is probably not going to be a big hit. So what you're going to want to do is make sure you sweeten it up a little bit. And that's pretty easy to do. All you need to do is just add a little bit more dates to it. So maybe add 3 or 4 more dates to your recipe. If you do that, just a word to the wise, you're going to have too wet of a dough. So at the very beginning, add an extra cup of sunflower seeds into your flour mixture that you're making. So an extra cup of sunflower seeds, whip that up, and that way you have extra if you need it when you add in the extra dates. This way of cooking, I know it sounds a bit strange, but this way of baking is really about feel, and it's about getting to know your dough and getting to know your food and how it works, instead of being really precise with measurements. So add in, make your flour, pour it into a bowl, do your wet ingredients, add in your extra dates, and then just slowly add your flour in until you reach that consistency that you're able to play with your dough, right? It'll tell you, right, if it's going to hold together and press down so you can roll it out and press cookies out of it. And if it's too sticky, you need a little bit more flour. Okay, just adding slowly and you'll get there. It's all about learning the feel of the food. So now these cookies also are perfect for a little bit of Christmas icing on them. And I'm trying out a new recipe in the next couple of days. So I'm going to see how that goes. And if I really like it, I will make sure that I share that with you guys. And one thing that you can do that's kind of fun with this kind of cookie is like an icing sugar type of sprinkle. So I found out recently, and I kind of like this little tip, that if you use arrowroot powder or tapioca starch and a little bit of stevia, now in this case I've used the white stevia, it's probably the only time in my life I would ever recommend using the bleached stevia, but in small quantities for these sorts of things, not so bad. So that's what I have here in this bowl. It's just powder. And then you take a little strainer and just sprinkle it through a little strainer. And then that looks sort of a little prettier and a little more Christmassy. And my son was really happy with those, to take those to school for his little party. So that is the recipe. Play around with it, enjoy it. Try and enjoy the process. It can be fun. The kids really get into helping do the cutout part, and they also like the icing part. So stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoy the recipe. Again, it's right up here, and you can also find it on my blog. Thanks very much.